I am your host, Jason Hopcus, and joined today with my co-host, licensed clinical social worker, Amy Staley, and our guest, Sam Wilson, who is currently serving as a coordinator of the adolescent support group at the Full Circle program. Sam, I'm so glad to have you here today. As I was mentioning before we hopped onto this recording, this is such an important conversation for us to have. I mean, youth are struggling at an alarming rate with substance use and abuse. And really, these conversations are about, working with the people who have the boots on the ground of doing the day-to-day work with youth and the challenges that they're facing. So thank you for being here. We're thrilled to have you.
Yes, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you. We really appreciate having you on. And I know Jason mentioned that Sam is coming to us from Full Circle. He's actually been there for 6 years. And for those who don't know, the Full Circle program is a youth at risk recovery community organization providing peer support to adolescents and young adults. He did also grow up here in the Denver metro area and shares that part of what led him to this community and to this population was his own journey with recovery. And so, Sam, we really appreciate all that you do for youth and that you're here to be a part of this conversation to talk to us about what's happening and what you're seeing through your work. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to the podcast today and why you're feeling excited to be here?
Yeah. See where to start with that. So I struggled a lot as a teenager, had a pretty serious drug and alcohol issue. I was fortunate enough to get sober at the age of 17 in actually a similar program to what we do at Full Circle. And a couple of years into my journey in recovery, I found that helping others and trying to give away what was given to me was something that I was hugely passionate about. So that's sort of how I got involved with Full Circle. And the reason I'm excited to be here today is anything that promotes young people getting the support that they need, I'm really grateful to be a part of. And that's ultimately why Full Circle exists. And it's what I found I'm the most passionate about. So,
Sam, I love it. As somebody who has been through my own journey of recovery, I recognize the power and the value in supporting other people with what we've learned that are also on the same path. So kudos to you for your sobriety and for your willingness to show up and serve other people. I guess just to jump into the conversation, this is a big conversation. We have a lot of questions, but really as a starting point, you and I were talking beforehand about, validating the fact that there's not a single statistic that shows us that collectively, substance use and misuse disorders are going down, depression, anxiety rates are going down. Like none of these things that people are struggling with, youth specifically, none of them are trending downward. Can you give us a little bit of a firsthand account of like, what are you seeing at Full Circle around the demand for the services that you guys provide?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a pretty astonishing journey, especially out in Denver. I think the need for support for adolescents has been really evident in just the number of young people that are participating in the program, which, in 2020, 2021, in the heart of the pandemic, participation here doubled, tripled. I mean, it went up a huge amount.
Wow.
Yeah. So we know that there's a lot of young people in pretty desperate need of help.
So when you say double or tripled, like give us contextually, like how many people are you guys serving a year?
So a year, we probably, it's around 300 families.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're primarily working with youth that are 13 to 18, right?
Yeah, so we have two support groups. The support group that I coordinate is for ages 13 to 17. And then we have another support group that works with 18 to 25-ish year olds.
Now, are you serving a certain population of addiction, or are you serving youth that are addicted across a spectrum of different substances?
Well, so the way that we talk about Full Circle is we are a youth at risk recovery community organization. So, and youth at risk is a pretty broad term, and we actually pretty explicitly tell these guys that this isn't an addiction program necessarily. Obviously, we have young people who struggle with that, but we sort of have the whole range. So we have some kids involved in the program that have never touched a drug in their life, that are attending for self-harm issues or eating disorders, or and we've got some kids that have used marijuana a handful of times and have gotten in trouble at school and with their parents, and are looking to redirect their path before they potentially develop a more serious issue. And we have some kids who have been using fentanyl and the most dangerous stuff out there. So our intention and goal as a program is to really be a resource for any young person who needs hope and needs help.
I love
Thank
that.
you. Yeah. And, you just mentioned fentanyl. You also talked about marijuana. Can you talk to us a little bit and educate for those who are listening? What types of substances are you seeing? I mean, in addition to those, I think that oftentimes it's really easy for us as adults to go into our heads about what we were exposed to or what we know people used when we were certain ages, and at times might not have a full snapshot of what youth are exposed to today. Can you talk to us about the substances that you're hearing youth talk about, or you're seeing folks come in that what they've been using?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the biggest things that we've noticed is, it seems like over time, teenage culture or youth culture and the drug culture have become synonymous
Hmm.
in some respects. Like it's almost the way it feels is like that's an expected part of adolescence. You know,
Hmm.
like uh, teenagers are, in a lot of ways, it seems like that's just the norm for a lot of them, and as a result of the drug culture becoming that much more prevalent, uh, the availability of substances has as well. So I think most of the kids that we work with have just about anything and everything available to them if they want it, which is scary. So
Mhm.
yeah, it it just seems like that's normal at this point for a lot of teenagers. It's normal to get high. That's what makes them cool. In some, for some kids, they feel like they're weird if they don't.
Hmm.
And that's really validated by the work that we've done in meeting with youth in the community over the last 5 years. And just, I want to mirror what I've heard over and over about. It's kind of like the t-shirt you put on to be cool, and I'm not trying to normalize this conversation. And it sounds like it is part of a normal conversation among youth, but it's really dangerous to think that we've moved into this space that fitting in has become culturally part of something that has the potential to kill you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
not only that, like the development, I mean, especially the group that you're working with, brains are still developing. I mean, I mean, all of us, when you're exposing your brain to drugs while it's still developing, that's obviously going to impact that as well. And so,
Yes.
yeah. And can you talk to us a little bit about when you're discussing the program and you're discussing kind of that people are using kind of across the spectrum of substances? What does that look like if somebody were to engage in some type of a program? Because there's definitely a lot of different thoughts out there within kind of a recovery world as far as abstinence only or engaging. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about what somebody might expect if they were engaged in a program like yours?
Yeah. So we a lot of our goal is to ultimately help young people find an alternative that's fulfilling on the same levels that the negative behavior is, but in a positive way. My experience getting sober as a teenager was, I knew intellectually that drugs and alcohol were having a negative effect on my life. And that was pretty easy to see if I was willing to take a step back and really look at it.
Right.
But for me, the fear was, if I give that up, I'm not going to be happy, because it was the best thing I'd ever found. It solved all my problems like that. And that's the other scary thing about teenagers getting involved in drugs and alcohol, and in my opinion at least, is it feels to a lot of them like an instant solution for all of the things that come along with adolescence. It's an instant social group. All of a sudden, fitting in can be as simple as I get high. It gives meaning. It provides this false purpose. It takes away the pain and anxiety and discomfort of adolescence. It's fun. And that's the biggest thing. It's fun.
Right.
And I certainly wasn't in a place as an adolescent where I was thinking through the long-term consequences of my fun today. So yeah, so much of what we're trying to do is help these guys figure out that they actually can be happy and free of substances at the same time, and they can have fun, and they can have friends. There's hope for something better than drugs and alcohol, or whatever negative behavior they're engaged in. And a lot of what I want, a lot of what I hope for these guys is that we can be an intervention at a time in their lives when they need one, and really help them get through the growing pains of adolescence without something that's going to inhibit their ability to develop. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's so important. But I mean, I think that the thing that's coming up for me is, I wonder what role technology has played in developing our sense of community. I'm going to use that in quotes, in this addiction culture, this substance culture. Obviously technology and the ability to connect that way has driven probably a lot of that. But what you're describing to me feels like the outlet that youth are choosing to experience actual real connection outside of using technology.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, does the integration of technology, and I don't want to vilify technology because there are many wonderful tools around it, but there is an element of you sit and watch a table full of youth and every one of them are on their phone. I'm just wondering how much this substance piece gives them an experience that is different than what they're getting in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I do know that one of the biggest things that we're trying to help the young people that we work with accomplish is establishing meaningful and real connections with other people that are based on something real. Right. That aren't just you get high, me too, we're cool.
Right. I mean, we have anything else in common.
Right. Yeah, that's I make that joke with these guys sometimes. I like, by the end, when I was using, I didn't know anything about my friends other than the drugs they liked. Right. But it was kind of like, do you have parents? Like, what's your middle name? Do you have like hopes or dreams or anything? I don't know. I just know that you like sativa more than you like indica, whatever. You like party drugs, and that's all we talk about. But it was weird because when the drugs were gone, or we had talked about everything there was to talk about, it would get really awkward and quiet. So those connections weren't based on this genuine concern for one another. And so that's a part of what we're trying to help these guys find. How do you have a real friendship with somebody?
Right. And having toured your facility, like, I would love for you to talk a little more about what the experience is, because, I saw youth interacting with each other. They were playing basketball. There was a pool table. There was a kitchen. it felt like it could be turned into a nightclub and shut down to have a rave at any given
Yeah.
point. Like, tell us a little bit about how you're building these connections through experiences that really are focused on not using.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty simple. We do every week, we do 2 support group meetings, which are all solution focused, centered around a topic pertaining to recovery. And the meetings are funny because they begin and end with loud music, and we on purpose try to get them to scream as much as humanly possible before the meeting actually starts, so they can sit there for an hour and not lose their minds.
Right.
because they're young.
Yeah.
And then we, after the meeting, we open our facility until 9:30 for them to connect and build relationships with each other that are, again, based on recovery. So, the thing that I want to see when I walk out into our office is funny. It's kind of a mullet. The front is very business, the back is very party. And you've seen it, the back's the warehouse, murals on the wall, sound system, DJ booth, ping pong table. And so the thing I hope to see is, them playing basketball with each other, playing ping pong, and getting to know each other's stories, really figuring out, like, who are you on a real level.
Mm-hmm.
And then Friday, Saturday nights, we do social functions. So house parties, dances, stuff like that. Something to compete with the negative stuff that they may otherwise be doing on a Friday or Saturday night. And then more importantly, we want them to actually be present and having experiences together. Because that's so much of what teenagers are looking for. The thing that, at least in my experience, made a kid cool was the amount of experience they had. Right. And the amount of adult experience they had.
Beyond how much you've gotten high or how many drugs you've used.
Yep. Or the joyride you took in your mom's car, or all the people that you've hooked up with, or whatever it was. And so, and kids are telling each other those stories at school. So we want to give these guys some experiences that they'll remember, that they'll be able to talk about, that'll be meaningful to them. So, and on a kid's first night at Full Circle, the thing that we generally do is sit down with them and go, all right, what's bringing you here? what are you dealing with? Why did you decide to check something like this out? Because we're strictly voluntary. Requirement of being involved in the program is wanting to be involved in the program. It's not something that your parents can force you to do. Typically the close of that initial meeting is, are you willing to give this thing a real shot? Yeah. And look, if you give it a real shot and you're not moving in the direction you want to move in, the truth is drugs aren't going anywhere. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop growing weed. And fortunately, they're not going to stop selling fentanyl. That's it. That, all of those things, they're not moving. But are you willing to take a real chance on recovery and see if it's better? Because I'm sitting here telling you that for me, it is. I'm happier in my life today than I ever was before. So are you willing to take a chance on that? And then from there, sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say that's beautiful. I mean, I really love hearing this, and I love the engagement and the finding other ways to have fun and the voluntary piece. I think there are definitely some components that youth do not want to feel forced into something. They want that autonomy and being able to make that choice. And so I think that's beautiful. And I'm also sitting here thinking about how we are talking about the connection piece and how drugs and alcohol can be some of that. But also, I think there are some people that might have connections with their peers and might be concerned. How do you all recommend, or what do you recommend if somebody was concerned that one of their friends was misusing or overusing or abusing a substance? How should they approach that conversation with them? What should they say to their friend?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's hugely challenging because one of the things I've gathered is that it seems really natural for young people, especially, to to want to take total responsibility for somebody else, you know. And almost it, and we've worked with a lot of kids who feel like it's on some level their fault that their friend is having a hard time. And so we, you know, the message we try to send is, look, you can't choose this path for somebody else, but what you can do is you can be honest and you can speak from the heart. And that's some of the stuff that really impacted me when I was in my drug use and alcohol use. I did have friends who sat me down and said things like, dude, I'm really, really worried about you. It doesn't seem like you're okay. It doesn't seem like you're happy. And I know I can't take that away for you, but I really hope that you do something about it. And I hope that you get help, because I'm just terrified to lose my friend.
Which is such a vulnerable conversation to have, and especially for a youth. I mean, the thing that really set the stage for me being so impassioned about working for the advancement of youth mental health specifically was just how willing youth today are to talk about their struggles in a way that most adults aren't. And I think it's so inspiring. I've often said youth are going to change how the world sees mental health, but it is rooted in this peer connection of talking about things, which can also have negative impacts also. I'm not diminishing that, but rooted really in this I see you and I'm concerned about you. And I think to show up and have that conversation, you also have to be aware of that may not go the way you want it to go, and you may lose a friendship for a time, you know, that could make a difference. But and
I think,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I just think we have data. I mean, we've surveyed youth, we've engaged in focus groups, and you obviously are even sharing now. We hear so much that youth are going to go to youth, right? Hopefully they have trusted adults. Hopefully they have people they're engaging with. But most of the time, a youth is going to start by going to a friend or be engaging with a friend. And that's why we think it's important to have these conversations. You know, I think we also want to touch on how parents should respond, but even everything that you've been sharing so far is so focused on that peer component. And that's obviously a huge driving force for people using and misusing. And our goal is to continue to write the narrative for how it can also be a way to have that positive connection and show people that you care. And I really appreciated your feedback about what was helpful in your journey, but also what you discussed with others, that you're not responsible for other people. You can be there, you can be caring, but it doesn't mean that it's your responsibility if they make different choices.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, what I've found is I have a hard time feeling good about me if I'm not going and having those kind of real vulnerable conversations with the people in my life, if I have some genuine concern for them, you know. And that's we hear some version of that echoed with the young people that we work with. So, you know, the hope is that everybody's got some friends who are willing to really be honest with them, even if that potentially means that they're, you know, that somebody gets mad.
Yeah, and I mean that's a vulnerable spot to be in, you know. I mean, even if you know that your friend's going down a path you don't want, what I'm inspired about in this, well, there's many things I'm inspired about, but what's coming up for me is a lot of the work that you guys do. It follows a 12-step framework, correct? So, in terms of this peer model, I mean, you run the adolescent program, but also there is an older generation that often serves as sponsors for these younger adolescents. Is that it's still really got a peer flavor to it regardless, right?
Yes.
So not only is there a connection point among people attending group together, there also is an element of they are being supported by people who are further along in the journey who could be perceived as older peers, right?
Yes. Yeah, we offer support to these guys for up to 2 years typically, which the beauty about that is we got a lot of kids who have anywhere from 6 months to 2 years of continuous recovery, who have made some really good progress in their lives. And those guys frequently serve as sponsors and mentors to newer participants, which is funny. We hear jokes sometimes from parents who, because when you're an adolescent, it can be easy for things from adults to sort of go in one ear and out the other, right? Like they do go to their peers a lot more. And so we'll hear stories of a kid's 17-year-old sponsor telling them something, and then they'll go home to their parents and be like, guess what, I figured out today that I need to be more honest. And then mom's like, dude, seriously? Like
we've been talking about that at dinner every night.
Right. But yeah, it's adolescence, right? They'll hear some things from peers that they'll never hear from the adults in their life. That's not universally true, but there's a lot of them for whom it is. So,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, you're fine. With that being said, I mean, what advice do you have for parents on how to engage with this, knowing that we have this data and we're, you're giving us real life experiences here that peers are going to go to peers, or peers might go to a mentor who's a year or two older than them and hear that differently. But how do you all engage families, or what is your advice for families if they're concerned about their child or loved one?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because I think that's a critical part of it's a critical factor for most young people. The thought that came to mind was, look, these are some of the most challenging issues that families ever face. And I'm not a parent, so I can't speak firsthand from that place, but I have seen a lot of families go through this process. I've seen a lot of parents figure out how to respond to this thing, and what comes to mind is trust your gut and courage. Because it's just challenging, and there's truth to a lot of families are in a position where their kids aren't necessarily being transparent with them, because in a lot of cases, transparency means I'll have to stop doing this, and that's not bad either. I think, so kids are, these kind of behaviors frequently lead to kids not being honest with their families, for one. And then for another thing, I think it's easy for parents to go, oh, well, I was doing that same thing when I was his age. And, but it's a different world. The stuff that kids are using today it's not the same stuff that most parents were using when they were young.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's so important. There's a couple of things that are resonating out of this, but since you just brought that up, let's talk about the differences in drugs today versus what drugs of a different generation grew up with, because they are not at all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you share a little more contextually around what is different about drugs today versus in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so fentanyl, for one, that's obviously newer to the drug market, and that's a terrifying one. The other big one is, the THC content that these guys are using today is massively higher than what most people were smoking in high school. So a lot of the kids that we work with are using wax and 90% THC, which that's just a huge amount, and it's very different from the 3% THC to I don't know, 9 or 10% THC that a lot of parents were probably using when they were teenagers. So
and also, to your point, talking about wax, I mean, the means of delivery are so different too. I mean, I know vape pens are very prevalent, and I mean, from what I've experienced, you've got kids that are getting high all day long on
Yes.
incredibly concentrated doses of THC
Yes.
that literally is kind of unfathomable to somebody who has not experienced it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the method of delivery is different, and it can be sneakier. So I hear stories of kids sitting in math class with a wax pen in their sleeve, just getting high, looking their teacher dead in the eye. So yeah, so it's just a different world, and I don't think we fully understand what the long-term implications of some of that are.
If there is a benefit of legalization of marijuana, there are dollars that are going towards researching this. So I feel like we will learn what the negative consequence is. And I think it's going to be staggering and it's going to be profound when we actually do learn that in real data and real statistics over time. But, regardless of that, what I'm hearing from you is it is prevalent, it is a problem, and it is definitely affecting our youth today.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to, if it's okay, I wanted to go back and say one more thing about the parent piece, just because I think that's so important. The thing that I've seen families do has been, ultimately trust their gut, because we tell parents this all the time. You know your kid better than we ever will, and you're a parent and I'm not. And if you think there's something wrong, there probably is. But it's so easy, and my family at points struggled with versions of this. It's so easy to not want to acknowledge that, and not want to acknowledge that, okay, something really might be wrong here, because it's an incredibly scary proposition. So denial it's a real thing, and it's, I think, a very natural response to the thing you love more than anything in the whole world not being okay, and not necessarily being able to fix it. So
Yeah.
one thing that comes up that really was validated by our research that we've done over the last many years, was we did a survey recently that wrapped up this summer, and we asked a question around youth's perspective of their mental health, and over 70% of them rated it as fair or poor. And then we asked the same question of parents about their perception of their youth's mental health, and they thought it was much better than what youth are reporting. There seems to be a pretty significant disconnect between how parents perceive their youth and what's actually happening. And I think there's, not to shame any parent, there's many things that are happening. But what we see over and over and again, and I hear from kids time and again, is they want to talk to their parents. Neither one of them seem to know how to make this connection around some of these really tough topics. Like, how do we open the door to start having conversations that hopefully prevent or preempt the things that you're dealing with? But like, from your perspective, what's the starting point for parents and youth to actually see each other and recognize that maybe something's going on we need to deal with?
Yeah. Well, I think I go back to honesty and love. I think some of the conversations that I really remember with my family were very vulnerable ones, and it was typically initiated by my parents. Because I was just in a place where I was hell bent on continuing to do what I was doing, and something trying to stand between me and drugs and alcohol was sort of like trying to stand between a dog and a bone. It was because that just felt like the only answer that I had at that point. But I think my parents really listening to their gut and going, "Dude, we love you more than anything, and we're terrified for you.
Yeah.
And we're going to get you some support, and we're going to get you some help." Kind of whether you like it or not. Like we're doing
right.
Well, and on that note, I think there are probably varying levels of times where parents do intervene or share those pieces. You know, for families who are listening or youth, at what point is it something that you work on by yourself or within your family? And at what point do you seek professional treatment? And do you have any recommendations for people about when things are at a place that it would feel important to make sure that you're engaging with a professional?
Yeah. I look, and there's going to be probably a lot of different opinions on this. I think it's worth getting a professional involved when yeah, when your gut's going off, when it seems like something's not okay, because getting a because that's the other challenge with these kind of situations is they frequently sit too close to the heart to be seen objectively. you
Mm.
know but getting another set of eyes and getting some objective perspective and feedback, I think can be instrumental in a lot of cases, in families getting the support that they need. So
Well, and I just
you
want to
know
say, we have a mutual connection that actually brought you and I together to have this conversation. And I want to affirm, and her child had gone through Full Circle, and they had experienced a myriad of treatment options before getting here. But really, the reality of one of the things I took away from their sharing was how important that parent component and structure at Full Circle was in just
mm,
really illuminating the challenges, but more importantly, recognizing that you're not alone and there are other parents who are going through exactly what you are or something similar. Like what I learned from speaking with them was um, it was a phenomenal education that you were offering parents at Full Circle also to
mm.
really understand the prevalence and the challenges and the issues, but also the connection and community of other people who are struggling with similar issues.
Yes. Yeah, that's a huge part of what we're trying to do. We want to provide, because it's a lonely place. That's the other thing.
Mm.
The thing that I've seen a lot of families go through is, ending up feeling like there's something wrong with me. Why is my kid struggling and Timmy down the street is getting into Harvard and whatever, like, and it's
Right.
all over Facebook, and so I must be doing something wrong as a parent. And that can also make it harder to fully assess the situation because nobody wants to feel like a bad parent. So one of the big things that we tell families is, look, you didn't cause it. You can't cure it. You can't fix it, and you can't control it. But the question is, how do you respond to it? You
Mm.
know, this issue is not. It's not your fault. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. The question moving forward is, yeah, how do you get support in this journey, and how do you respond? Because
Well,
that's ultimately
but
in your
what if
power.
I'm the parent that's struggling with my own substance misuse or has a history with that? Like, I think comparison is a thief. I mean, it's a trap flat out. But the
Hmm.
reality is I think some of these things really push against parents and adults having to own their own side of the street and keep it clean. I'm guessing you guys see that probably fairly often. Like, I can imagine the guilt of that probably weighs heavy on when to intervene or not.
Yes, it does. Yeah, and that's a really good point. Um, yeah, we one of the topics that's discussed a lot amongst the parents is the three C's, right? So you didn't cause it, can't cure it, can't control it. And one of the other things that's talked about is there is a fourth C, which is contributing, right? So and that becomes a part of the question for a lot of families. How do I make sure that I'm not contributing to this?
Right.
Um, so and in situations like that, I always think it's um I guess the message that I hope a lot of families get is, um let yourself off the hook and take a serious look at what do we need to do from here. and if substance misuse is a part of the equation, then get some support and help for that. So that way,
which may include support for yourself, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. That was what I was getting at with that. Like if
Right.
you're a parent,
I mean,
and
aside from what they can get at Full Circle, I mean, it may
yes,
open Pandora's box that everybody could use some support.
yes, exactly. Yeah, so if there's a parent who's struggling with their own substance use issue, I would absolutely say get some help for that, get some support for that. So that way, that way you're not in a position where whatever your child's issue is more difficult to respond to, or where you potentially feel shackled by some guilt, because that's not a place anybody wants to be.
Yeah.
Well, it's also really beautiful to lead by example.
Yes.
Well, and I'm thinking of this piece too, when we're talking about treatment, we're talking about recovery, whether it's for parents or youth or both. As an LCSW, I know that relapse is typically part of a recovery process for folks and can have varying levels. You're talking about the 4th C of contributing, but can you talk about what parents can do to best support minimizing relapse, or the number of relapse occurrences, and ways that they can be involved and have an awareness of kind of the reality of the recovery process?
Yeah. That's another joke we make is that, look, if you hand us a stinky, disrespectful, obnoxious, rebellious, self-centered teenager who does drugs, we will probably hand you back a stinky, rebellious, obnoxious, self-centered, disrespectful teenager. Like recovery doesn't cure adolescence. And it's easy to have that expectation, like if I can get my kid off of drugs and get him some support, then next week he'll be the president of whatever club at school, and he'll be fully employed, and he'll never be late again to anything, and like that kind of thing. So a lot of what we encourage families to do is have patience with the process. Adolescence cures itself with time, and so knowing that, it's worth making sure that you're picking the battles that really matter, and not wasting them on things that realistically a lot of these guys are probably going to figure out and grow out of as a part of their very natural maturing and development. So pick the battles that matter. Know that kids are going to be kids. Sobriety doesn't fix that. Be patient with them, love them like hell, but whatever you decide those battles are that are really important to fight, stand behind those.
Right.
So
can I ask a question just to make sure that because I am not as familiar with your program. I know Jason came for a tour and I heard amazing things about it. Is the program open to anyone? I heard you say guys a couple of times, and so I wanted to clarify for the listeners. Is it open for non-binary individuals, males, females, etc.? Okay, so I just want to clarify that people are aware that the program is available for anyone.
Oh yes, 100%.
You have a big enough table to serve everyone.
Yes.
I love it. And in the instances that somebody, I think the thing that's coming up for me and recognizing, there is an element in recovery about an individual's willingness to get help and to get better. And I know developmentally there are places that maybe we've met a youth at a space that they don't see that this is a problem like their parents does, or they don't want to get better. How do you address those situations when you've got a youth that is adamant or defiant about this is not a problem? I don't want to get help. I don't think I need to get help. Like, what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I'll share some of my own experience because I was 100% that kid. There was a long time where I just had no interest. I had no interest in getting help. I had no interest in changing my life. I didn't think, and I was convinced that I had like a school problem, a parent problem, a cop problem. Like the problem was
Not
anything
your
but
problem.
yeah, exactly. And there, I mean, I thought some pretty outlandish things, um, but I think what ended up happening for me was there was a combination of different factors. One was my parents getting really involved in a support system that could help them figure out how to navigate this, and that was a critical piece because as they looked at how do we respond to this in an effective way, that definitely had an effect on me. So my parents got involved in a support system, and they did a lot of those things I was talking about earlier. Like they picked the battles that really mattered to them, and they had some logical consequences associated with me crossing those lines. And they gave me a ton of opportunities to get help and get support. And so what ended up happening was when I got to a place where the pain of the way that I was living was pretty tremendous, I knew that there was a better way. And I knew that I could change. Had they not given me all those opportunities to experience recovery firsthand, I don't think I would have known that. So
You
that
eventually came to your own bottom.
Yes, I did. But I think, yeah, my parents doing all of the work that they did was a lot of why that ended up happening when I was 17 instead of much farther down the road.
Yeah, which is beautiful. Thank you for your vulnerability.
This has been an incredible conversation. I know you've got other things to do, and we could probably talk for 3 hours about this, but I'm so grateful for the service that you're giving to the community in helping people stay sober and or get sober and find whatever they're getting from your program. I know there's a myriad of paths there, but thank you for your service. It means a lot.
Grateful to be a part of it. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing with us your personal journey and how that has informed you as far as the work you do today. And I can tell that youth are it's very easy for you to connect with them. I can tell why you're in the role that you're in and that youth are able to connect with you and that you're real with them about these pieces. So thank you for that. To wrap up, we always do finish with one question for anyone who's on our podcast. So what does nobody's perfect mean to you?
The phrase?
Yeah, if you had to think of what nobody's perfect means to you, what is that?
I really love that. Yeah, I think for me that means give me a second with that one.
No, you're fine. We put you on the spot with that one, so.
No, yeah, you're good. I think it means let yourself off the hook a little bit, which obviously isn't the same as don't change anything, don't get support or don't make adjustments. Just I think the experience for me in recovery and the experience for my family as well was ultimately we did the best we could with what we had until we realized that it wasn't working anymore. But that wasn't the same as I was a bad kid. It wasn't the same as they were bad parents. It didn't mean that at all. It just meant that we needed to readjust the sails a little bit. To me, that's a pretty consistent part of life as a human being. So
There's a
So
lot of
yeah,
grace in that answer.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm.
And that concludes our time here today. Thank you for being part of Nobody's Perfect, a community dedicated to supporting, inspiring, and empowering youth and families. We hope you've enjoyed this transformative conversation today. And together, we're dismantling stigma and providing solutions for the mental health and well-being challenges we all can encounter. Be sure to join us every other week on cozy101.com/imperfect, or find us on your favorite streaming platform to continue embracing our shared human experience. Also, if you haven't done so, find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Nobody's Perfect Community. I'm your host, Jason Hopcus, and it's been a pleasure sharing this story with you today. Stay connected, stay inspired, and remember, nobody's perfect because perfection isn't real. Your story is. Until next time.